Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club, where I'm doing a sub-series of 365 episodes of all that I've ever learned from Tony Robbins. It's early morning, Sydney time. It's going to be a spectacular spring Sydney morning. And I'm just seeing yet another cruise ship coming into the overseas passenger terminal to dock up. It's the Royal Princess, just a massive, massive ship, and it's come in a little earlier than what I expected. They normally come in at 6:30, but obviously this one here is just running a little ahead of schedule. So instead of going over there to the international passenger terminal, I've come over here on the north side, and I'll make my way round to the Opera House and just admire this beautiful, beautiful piece of art on water. And you can see we've also got a full moon, or almost a half moon now, but it just looks spectacular over here. That ship there and the harbour bridge in the background. Anyway, let's just go on a bit of a walk and talk. I've got another 200 metres to get to the front of the Opera House, and hopefully our little friend the seal will be there to greet us. But what we want to do today is to talk about a concept that Tony Robbins loves to talk about. And it's about living a deliberate sort of existence where we design our lives as best we can, of course, because at the end of the day, it all has to revolve around God's will. But to try and design a life where we identify gaps, where we try and close gaps, where we introduce coaches in our lives, where we change the way we think so that we're more teachable and more coachable, so we can make the most. Because what Tony Robbins talks about is the fact that we need to be living with positive expectancy. We need to be deliberate in what we do and not just be laissez-faire, whatever happens, but to be more focused. Because at the end of the day, life and all the things we do are a process. And the quicker you understand that there is a process and that we can not necessarily control that process, but we can have some valuable input into that process, then it's that from that day onwards, our life takes a different road, because instead of being a victim of circumstance, you become a victor of your direction. With God's help, of course, with God's good providence and God's mercy and God's approval, so to speak, then you can live the life that you were designed to live, as long as, of course, it's something to do along the lines of your calling or callings. We say from time to time that it's important to ask yourself the basic question, and that basic question is what I'm doing, is what I'm thinking, is what I'm planning to do going to be God-pleasing? Is it going to add to my calling? Is it going to help my neighbour? Is it going to help me become bigger, better, stronger? So that not only can I do things and do more things, I can do more things for other people, and I can do more things to partner with God and to be His servant, to be of service to God, to glorify God, and to be of service to others, to add value, in other words. And he also talks about the importance of pivoting, being able to pivot. And what pivot means to me, based on what I've learned from Anthony Robbins, is that we need to be like water, and to be flexible in our approach and not to allow impediments, barriers, or anything dull our spirit. Bruce Lee is a very big proponent on the power of being like water, because he says that water cannot be easily controlled and contained. It'll find a way. And if you speak to a builder, they will always tell you that one of their biggest problems, one of their biggest challenges, is the fact that water can cause them grief. It can cause a building grief because it seems to find its way into everything they do. And it's really hard to waterproof. So while the world tries to waterproof us and to stop us from going places and doing things, what Anthony Robbins says is it's up to us if we're able to pivot. And pivot means being able to change ever so slightly, ever so interestingly, then that change, however so slight, can have a massive impact to the direction. So even if you just change direction by 1 degree, in 100 metres it's not going to make a big difference, but in 1,000 miles or 100,000 miles it's going to be a significant difference, and you're going to end up in a completely different place to where you are. So the importance of being a pivot, we know that in sport, people who can pivot, or people who have pivotal roles, are probably the most important people in the game. People who are a halfback or a 5/8 are able to direct where the play goes by reading the game, being able to figure out where they are, where their players are, where the other players are, where the strengths and weaknesses are starting to develop, and then to move the focus of the game from one side of the field to the other. We know when we watch soccer, or football as some people call it, that they pivot all the time. They kick the ball back to the goalie, they kick it across to the winger, they centre it, they kick it back to the midfield, and they're constantly moving the ball left, right, front, back to find a chink, to find an opportunity to strike. And for that reason, the big man talks about the importance of being able to design a life, and to know that even though we put a lot of effort into design, that God's delays are not God's denials. If you want something bad enough, you're going to end up getting pretty close to it. I'm not going to say you're going to get there, but for most people, if they have a single focus and they put all their effort and obsess over it significantly, then sooner or later they're going to get there. There's no doubt about it. And the best way to get there is to be flexible in your approach, because not every attempt is going to be successful. Each attempt may have a barrier, may have a hump in the road, may have certain issues where most people give up at that particular point in time. whereas the people who actually get there are the ones who just stick to it and just find a way. Anthony Robbins uses the metaphor of a young child when they're learning to crawl and learning to walk. Nobody tells that child once they fall over or trip over that they're never going to be able to get there, they'll never be able to walk, they won't be able to get what they're trying to get. The child just keeps on trying and trying and trying until they get where they want or what they want. And similarly, people need to have the same sort of craving, the same thirst. Anthony Robbins talks about the fact that you can teach many things, but you can't teach desire. You can't teach commitment. You can't teach willpower. You can't teach that thirst, that craving that some people have, that no matter what, no matter how many times you tell them they can't have it or they can't get there, there's no way in the world that you can ever slow them down or stop them, because they're like a heat-seeking missile. Anthony Robbins uses this all the time. Once they lock in on the target, regardless of what the target is, because there are some people, regardless of what they do, they just end up getting there. And it's not because of their skills, it's because of their mindset. It's because of the fact that they have that drive. And I was speaking to somebody the other day, and I was saying that the South Africans, I was always confident that the Springboks were going to defeat the All Blacks in the World Cup. And it's not because of the skills. I've got no idea who most of the players were. It wasn't about the skills or anything else. And I know that the All Blacks are a great team. They are very committed. They have a lot of great players. But one thing I know for sure and for certain, having worked with and known South Africans throughout my life, is that culturally they are very, very focused and very, very tough and very, very opinionated. And I know that regardless of whether or not there are any red cards in the World Cup final, even if you played that World Cup final again, I still believe that the Springboks would have found a way to beat the All Blacks. It's just one of those things, I remember when I was playing rugby at school, I went to Newington College, which is a rugby school, but we used to play at a school called Joey's, St Joseph's at Hunters Hill. And they were a school of boarders, and they loved their rugby, and rugby for them defined them. And whenever Newington would play Joey's, and back then when I went to Newington, Saturday sport was compulsory, and the whole school played rugby on Saturday. They had lots and lots of teams, and everybody played the other schools which had lots and lots of teams, and all the schools were rugby schools back in those days, whereas these days they've introduced other sports. They've introduced soccer, they've introduced Australian rules, they've introduced a number of other sports. So what has actually happened is the focus has now dissipated, and there is no one predominant sport that unites and brings the whole school together anymore. And that's endemic to the world, with social media, with choice, and all of these other things. What we have is we're creating a world where everybody is doing their own thing, by all means enjoying their lives, but what is lacking is that uniting force where I remember when I was going to school that everybody watched the same TV programs. You know, there were 4 channels, Channel 9, Channel 10, Channel 7, Channel 2. Nobody watched Channel 2 when I was a kid. And you get on a train in the morning or you go to school and everybody would be socialising and chatting about what they saw on television that night. It was a uniting force. It just united people because you had a common element, you had a common thread that brought people together that you could talk about, be it Number 96 or The Box or Gilligan's Island or MASH. You know, there were certain programs that would be playing on television at the same time every night. Now, there was no programs on demand. Now, you couldn't just flip from one channel to the other and have hundreds of channels and be able to see repeats whenever you wanted to. You know, if you were there, you saw the news. If you weren't home at that time, then you missed the news. It was as simple as that. And what it did was that it brought people together. Just like Saturday sport, where everybody played rugby, it would bring all the school together. And the people who were really, really good at rugby, the first 15, for example, would be honoured. The whole school would see them as heroes, and the whole school would be talking about the fact that on Saturday, you know, they won or whatever. But whenever we would play Joey's, getting back to the point before, whenever the school would be playing Joey's, if your team won against Joey's, that in itself was a sporting highlight. I remember when I was playing, I forget, it was either the 15As or the 16As, we were playing Joey's, and we were playing on the main oval at school, and we had a kick to win. And I remember that moment where that kick just sailed over the line, over the goalpost, over the black dot, and we beat Joey's, and we were so happy. I was in a team playing with my mate Bill Maywis, who was a year below me at school, but because I was young for my year, we played in the same team. And there was a ruck, and Bill had his foot over the ball, and the Joey's halfback just started kicking Bill in the shins, just kicking and just rucking at the ball, but very, very aggressively. So much so that I pushed the halfback, and I was just a little bit pissed off that he was kicking my mate so aggressively, and we received a penalty, and that penalty was the difference. That penalty was the points that we needed to separate us at full time, and we were just so happy to have won that game. And I remember the Joey's players. The Joey's players walked off the field dejected, angry, unhappy, and some of them were crying. Some of the players were crying because they knew that when they'd get back to school at night, for them, they would be ridiculed. Their failure to win would have been one of the rare failures across all the teams in the school. So in the dining room, when they were having dinner, they'd be the butt of jokes probably. But we were happy to win, we were happy to take the win. And once again, just goes to show that life has its ups and downs. Hey, and here we go. Good morning. Hello. Here we've got the seal. Sammy the seal. just chilling out over here on the steps of the Opera House and thinking that at one point in time in the past, the Queen Elizabeth II, would have used these stairs to come up here to commemorate the opening of the Opera House back in 1973. So let me just open up the lens. Who would have thought that in 2023 I could be down here at the Opera House early in the morning and see a seal on the steps of the Opera House. Just beautiful. Just lovely to be one with nature, even just for a moment. Anyway, so let's just get back to what we were saying there before. So what's happening now, I guess, in the world is that because we have so much choice, it just becomes a little bit harder to have things in common, because everything blends into each other. The focus changes, and there's not as much interest. But having said that, I do note that the Matildas have got a huge amount of support, so much so that they've got much more support than what the Socceroos have. And that's because of some wonderful marketing and the fact that we had the World Cup, the Women's World Cup here in Australia, which in of itself was an absolute success. Even though the Matildas didn't play all that well, it was a successful campaign and Australians got behind them. So once again, if we look across sport, if we look across nature, if we look across every aspect of our society, you know, the importance of pivoting, being able to change direction and look for a new opening, look for new opportunities, is really, really important. And it separates people who are going to be successful from those who may not achieve their potential in their lives. We just need to continue to live with hope, as I mentioned before, and as Tony Robbins talks about time and time again, to live with positive expectancy, but not to be Pollyanna in those beliefs, but to be realistic, you know, to make sure that you're not just ticking the box and doing things just to make people happy, but you're doing things that are going to have an impact and change other people's lives. And by changing other people's lives, you're going to end up changing your own life as well. I must admit, I'm standing about 20 metres away from Sammy the Seal, but there is a pong. There is a pong that Sammy seems to have, that seems to float and just carry in the breeze, which is funny. So just going back, just summarise what we just talked about today. And as I say, I'm going to continue this program, this sub-series of all that I've ever learned from Tony Robbins over the years, and just take little things that he says and expand on them and just give examples, life examples of what it means to me to try and invite you to also consider examples that you may have in your life. Because as my mate John Nematala always used to say to me, you know, it's not what you know, it's how you apply it. And my friend Peter Kaliaropoulos also taught me the same sort of things as well. And he says that, James, it's all about getting results. And he was one of those people who was a voracious reader, a great leader, a voracious reader, but he would not only just read stuff and understand it, he would apply it. So he'd be the sort of person that would be flying back from the US on the plane, would read a book on that flight, and he'd get back to work and he'd start applying those new learnings. He'd apply it in his language, he'd apply it in his plans, he'd apply it in his strategy, and he didn't waste it a moment. He didn't put it into his inventory. He didn't put it away. He didn't fold it up as he folded up the book and moved on to something else. He would apply it, he would use it, and he would communicate it to other people and teach other people the same sort of things that he'd learned through his example. So the importance of application, the importance of taking things and pivoting so that you find a gap, you find an opening. And as I mentioned on yesterday's vlog, years ago when I heard Peter Sterling comment on a state of origin, and he said that throughout a game, many opportunities will present themselves, and the team that takes that opportunity, takes that moment and maximizes and leverages that opportunity are the team that are going to have the better outcomes. So today in our lives, we are all going to have opportunities that present themselves. Opportunities to reach out to family and friends, opportunities to show protya, to say hi to people, to smile, to connect, to help, to lead. Plenty of those opportunities will arise. Most people will let them flow past them without doing anything. So the key message, the key call to action from Anthony Robbins is to embrace those opportunities and make the most of them. Don't let them just flow past you. Don't let them pass you without taking action. Just say to yourself, do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just launch into it. Just do it is the key message. So just a recap of what I did yesterday afternoon. Yesterday afternoon I went down with my sister-in-law to Bondi after work, got in the car, went for a drive, and we went down to have another visit and look around the sculptures by the sea. And there was an installation there from a Greek artist who's a friend of Elpidha's, a friend of Elpidha's friend. So Elpidha's friend Natasha in Greece knows this artist and told her that in Sydney at the moment her friend is displaying one of her artworks at the Sculptures by the Sea. So we went down to see it, and lo and behold, they have all the flags of all the international artists on flag posts down there, and I saw the Greek flag, and I just said to myself, just amazing that one person can do something and have such an impact that they can have the national flag of all of Greece up there amongst the international flags of other countries. And how chuffed I was and how honoured I was to see Psorokosina, the little Greece, being represented here on the other side of the world by one of her daughters, who is showing off one of her beautiful artworks. It's a shell. It's a fairly big installation. It's a shell with feet, with legs underneath it, and it's called Keep Walking. Very thought-provoking and very interesting. So we went down there, checked things out, took a few videos, and then went down to the Watsons Bay Hotel and had dinner, which once again was a lovely experience. So serene, so peaceful. And I saw for the first time that next door there, Doyle's restaurant, also has a bar area and a casual dining sort of area next to their restaurant. So next time we go down, we'll go and visit that establishment, which once again is beautiful because you've got a view of Sydney Harbour, a view of Sydney, where you can be just sitting there having a beer and just see the night lights of the cityscape. So yeah, just something extra to do. And as Anthony Robbins says, it's these little things that we do in life that have the biggest impact. You can ask yourself at any point in time, what is one thing that I can do? What's one more thing that I can do to design my life and to turn a 7 into an 8, to change the experience? And getting back to the first points we were talking about, that God wants us to work with Him, to design a life, to make our lives better and to make other people's lives better as well. And by having a better life, by removing the stresses, by removing some of the challenges, or not necessarily removing them, by changing the focus, we can make this world a better place. Anthony Robbins says we're all going to have challenges and problems, but what differentiates, what sets us apart, or what sets certain people apart from others, is the way they focus on it. You know, do they focus on what they don't want, or do they focus on what they want? Because where your focus goes, your energy flows, and you'll attract the things you focus on. And if you're focusing on things that you don't want, guess what? All of those things will come flooding and manifest themselves in your life and in your world. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of all that I've learned from Anthony Robbins, that I'm tacking on to my 1600 vlogs that I've done to date on Jim's 5am Club, and we'll see how we go. But I really enjoy getting up early in the morning. I hope you enjoy the interaction as well, where we can go on a walk and talk, and I can use this magnificent city, the magnificent city of Sydney, as a backdrop where we can engage with each other, talk about things that are empowering, and hopefully living, learning and passing it on. Anyway, I'll just get one more look at our mate over here. I'll just open up the lens, and here we have Sammy. And I wish you all the very best for the rest of the day. Yassas, take care, and bye for now.